Her betrayal cost me everything except the patent that made me rich. My name is Nathan Hale, and I'm 36 years old. I used to think I had it all figured out: my life, my career, my marriage. I'm a robotics engineer, the kind of guy who spends hours tweaking algorithms and perfecting servo motors, all to make machines move like they're alive. I co-founded an AI automation startup with my wife, Elena, and for a while, it felt like we were unstoppable. She handled the charm offensive with investors, dazzling them with her quick wit and magnetic smile, while I built the tech that made our little company hum. Together, we were a perfect team. Or so I thought. Here's the kicker: her betrayal cost me everything except the patent that made me rich. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started unraveling, because when it began, I didn't see it coming. Not even close. Picture this: it's late summer, and our startup is on the cusp of something big. We'd spent 3 years pouring ourselves into a robotics system that could revolutionize warehouse automation. Think nimble bots that don't just move boxes but anticipate needs, adapting in real time. The prototype was my baby, a meticulous blend of code and hardware that I'd nursed through countless sleepless nights. Elena and I owned the patent together, a 50-50 split, because that's what you do when you're married and building something from the ground up. She was 34, 2 years younger than me, and the kind of person who could walk into a room and own it. Investors loved her. I loved her. Our company was valued at a modest $10 million, but whispers of a big deal were starting to circulate. That's when the cracks appeared. It's funny how you don't notice the little things until they pile up. At first, it was just Elena being busier than usual. Late nights she chalked up to strategy sessions with advisors, her phone buzzing more often, a distracted edge to her laugh. I'm not the jealous type. I'm analytical, methodical, maybe too trusting, if I'm honest. I figured she was stressed. We were both stretched thin, and I didn't want to nag. But then there was this guy, Victor Lang. He showed up like a storm cloud on a clear day. 41, all sharp suits and sharper smiles, a high-stakes investor with a reputation for turning startups into gold mines. Or graveyards, depending on who you asked. Elena met him at a pitch dinner our board arranged, and suddenly, he was everywhere. Board meetings. Email chains. Casual mentions over dinner. Victor thinks we should push harder on marketing, she'd say, or, Victor's got connections at that trade show. I didn't mind at first. Investors meddle, it's their nature. But something about him set my teeth on edge. I'm not a dramatic guy, but my life was about to turn into a chess game I didn't know I was playing. Elena was my queen, vital, powerful, irreplaceable. Victor? He was a rook, sliding into position with purpose. And me? I was the king, slow and steady, assuming the board was mine. What I didn't realize was that the game had already shifted, and I was one move from checkmate. The desire part? You're probably wondering how it all fell apart and how I clawed my way back. Stick with me, because the action's coming. It starts with a suspicion, a nagging itch I couldn't scratch. It was a Tuesday night when the first real doubt hit me. I was in my office at home, a cluttered space full of circuit boards and coffee cups, reviewing some test data. Elena had said she was meeting an advisor downtown, something about refining our pitch for a new funding round. She'd kissed me on the forehead before she left, her perfume lingering like always. But when I checked my phone later, I saw a notification from our company's cloud server. Someone had accessed my private terminal at 11:47 p.m., a terminal only Elena and I had credentials for. The log showed a download, confidential patent files, the heart of our tech. I stared at the screen, my pulse ticking up. She wasn't even supposed to be at the office. I texted her, casual as I could manage, "Hey, you still out? Long night, huh?" Her reply came fast, "Yeah, just wrapping up. Home soon." No mention of the office. No explanation. I sat there, overthinking like I always do, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd swung by to grab something. Maybe it was a glitch. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That's when I started paying attention, really paying attention. Elena's late nights got later. Her excuses got vaguer. Victor's name popped up more, always tied to some urgent decision I wasn't part of. I'd walk into board meetings and feel like an outsider, watching them exchange glances I couldn't read. My meticulous brain started cataloging it all: the way she'd angle her phone away when she typed, the sudden consulting trips she took without me, the way Victor's firm was pushing for changes to our roadmap that didn't align with my vision. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself I was paranoid, that marriage and business were just messy sometimes. But the itch wouldn't go away. And then I found the access logs, proof she'd been in my system again, pulling files she didn't need for any advisor meeting. That's when I knew I had to dig deeper. So here I am, at the start of it all, a guy who thought he had a solid life, good wife, good company, good future, watching it fray at the edges. I didn't know what was coming, not yet. I didn't know about the affair, the backroom deals, or the way I'd turn it all around. All I had was a hunch, a few data points, and a growing sense that the woman I'd built my world with was hiding something big. If you're wondering how it ends, don't skip ahead. I'm living it as I tell it, step by step, and trust me, it's a ride worth taking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and it had been building for weeks. Elena's excuses had grown flimsier, her late nights at the office more frequent, and the way she avoided my questions left me restless. Then there were the access logs on my private terminal. Someone had downloaded sensitive patent files after hours, and only she and I had the keys to that system. When I brought it up, she laughed it off, claiming she'd forgotten to log out, but her explanation didn't hold up. I've always been methodical, a problem solver by nature, and the pieces weren't fitting together. Doubt gnawed at me, and I knew I had to act, even if it meant stepping into territory I'd rather avoid. So, I decided to find out for myself what was really going on. With my background in robotics, setting up a surveillance script was straightforward, though the decision weighed heavily on me. I coded a program to tap into the security cameras at our cabin, a quiet retreat she'd been visiting more often, always with some vague story about needing space. I told myself it was just precaution, a way to ease my mind, but deep down, I braced for something I might not be ready to face. The script ran silently in the background, capturing everything, and a few days later, I found myself alone in my home office, staring at a file on my screen. My pulse raced as I hesitated, knowing that once I opened it, there'd be no turning back. I clicked play, and the truth unfolded before me. The footage began with the cabin's living room, empty and still, the familiar furniture bathed in a warm glow from the lamps we'd picked out together. I almost relaxed, thinking maybe I'd been wrong, until the door swung open, and Elena stepped inside, her laughter cutting through the silence. She wasn't alone. Victor Lang followed her, the investor who'd been hovering around our company for months, his arm brushing hers as they crossed the threshold. They settled onto the couch, closer than colleagues should be, and my chest tightened as the audio kicked in, their voices crisp and unmistakable through the hidden microphone. "We need to keep this quiet," Elena said, her tone sharp but steady. "Nathan's sharp. If we move too fast, he'll catch on." Victor leaned back, a smug grin spreading across his face. "He's too busy tinkering with his machines to notice anything. Once we secure the patent, he's irrelevant. We'll be the ones calling the shots." Elena frowned, her fingers tapping the armrest. "I don't want this to get uglier than it has to. He's still my husband." Victor's expression hardened, his hand resting on hers. "Are you wavering now? You knew what this would take. The company's potential is massive, but Nathan's dragging it down with his slow pace. We can't afford that." She sighed, brushing her hair back with a tired gesture. "I didn't expect it to feel this heavy. That's all." He squeezed her hand, his voice softening. "It won't be messy. We'll push him out with a decent payout. He'll land on his feet. And you and we won't have to sneak around anymore." Elena met his gaze, her hesitation fading. "You're right. It's the smart move. For us, for the future." They leaned in, their kiss sealing the betrayal, and I stopped the video, my hands trembling too much to let it play on. The air felt thick, suffocating, as the reality crashed over me. She wasn't just deceiving me with him, they were scheming to take the company, my life's work, right out from under me. Disbelief numbed me at first, but then a sharp ache settled in, the kind that comes from seeing everything you trusted unravel in an instant. How had it come to this? How had the woman I'd built a life with turned into someone I didn't recognize? I sat there, staring at the frozen frame, their faces locked in that moment of conspiracy. We'd started the company together, Elena and I, pouring years into it, and now she was ready to throw me aside like an outdated prototype. Victor's arrogance only fueled the fire. They thought I was oblivious, too absorbed in my work to see their plan. My mind raced, replaying every odd glance, every half-truth she'd fed me. The sting of her infidelity was hard, but the calculated move against my stake in the company cut deeper. I couldn't let emotion take over, though, not yet. I had to think, to strategize, because this wasn't just personal, it was a battle for everything I created. Breathing deeply, I forced myself to focus on what I could control. The patent was their target, the heart of our tech, and I needed to protect it. We held it jointly, but there had to be a way to lock down my share. I remembered something from our ownership agreement, a clause about contingencies, maybe a legal angle I could use. I pulled up my files, scrolling through contracts as the hours ticked by, searching for anything that could give me an edge. Determination replaced the shock, hardening into resolve. They'd underestimated me, both of them, assuming I'd stay blind and compliant. But I wasn't going to let them win. I'd fight back, and I'd do it with the same precision I'd always brought to my work. The moment had to be exact, deliberate, like aligning every piece on a board before the first move. I couldn't let my feelings overrun my reasoning, not with everything hanging in the balance. Elena always navigated the social currents effortlessly, reading people and bending situations to her will, while I stayed grounded in logic, in systems. Tonight, though, I had to take charge. I picked our house for this, the space where we'd forged our life, late nights hashing out ideas, mornings lingering over coffee. There was a symmetry to it, a weight, that this would be where it all came apart. I waited for her to get back from one of those strategy meetings she'd been leaning on as her alibi lately. When she walked in, her heels tapped the hardwood, her smile tight and rehearsed, not touching her eyes. "Hey, you're still awake," she said, tossing her bag onto the counter. "I figured you'd be lost in your projects by now." I didn't return the smile. "We need to talk, Elena." Her face shifted, a quick shadow of discomfort passing over it. "Can it hold off?" "I'm wiped out." "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "It can't wait." She let out a breath, pulling a chair out at the kitchen table. "Fine, what's going on?" I sat across from her, hands locked together to steady them. "I know about you and Victor." The words landed hard, solid, no taking them back. Her eyes widened for a split second before she painted on confusion. "What are you saying?" "Don't," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "Don't play it off. I've got the recordings. I heard it all." She went still, her breath hitching. For a moment, she just looked at me, gears turning behind her eyes, hunting for a way out. Then she leaned back, arms crossed. "So, you've been digging into my business?" "Digging?" I repeated, disbelief spiking. "You're pulling sensitive files from my system, scheming to shove me out of my own company, and you're worried about me crossing a line?" Her jaw clenched. "It's not what you're making it out to be, Nathan." "Victor and I," enough, I cut her off, volume climbing despite myself. "I heard you both. You're setting me up to lose everything, the patent, the company, all of it. And that's not even the ugliest part." Her face drained of color, but she held her ground. "You don't get it. The company's stalling out. You're too careful, too plotting. Victor's got the reach, the drive to push us higher. I was trying to save what we've got." "By stabbing me in the back?" I fired back. "By getting involved with him?" She flinched, her mask slipping. "That wasn't the plan. It just happened. The business stuff, though, that's different. I was looking out for what's ahead." "What's ahead for us?" I let out a harsh laugh, unexpected even to me. "You're tearing down everything we made. How's that looking out for anything?" She stood, pacing the floor. "You're so locked into the tech, Nathan, you miss what's out there. We need to grow, to keep up. Victor can do that." I didn't want it to hit you like this, but you forced my hand. Forced your hand? I echoed, fury surging. You could have come to me, worked it out together. Instead, you hit it, lied straight to me, and now you're acting like it's my fault? She spun to face me, voice shaking. I tried reaching you. You're always buried in your work, tweaking endlessly. You don't hear me. You don't see the ground shifting under us. The world's moving, and we're slipping. That's not right, I said, rising to meet her. I've been refining things, strengthening the core. But you couldn't wait. You wanted the shortcut. She glared, trembling. It's not about shortcuts. It's about staying alive out there. If we don't pivot, we're done. Victor gets that. And what about us? I asked, my voice catching. What about what we had? Did that ever matter to you? She looked away, shoulders dropping. It did. But we stopped being a unit somewhere along the line. We turned into co-workers, then barely that. Her words sliced through me, cutting past the anger to something tender and bruised. So, you found someone else to step in, I said low. Someone who could give you what I didn't. Her eyes locked onto mine, a tangle of regret and steel. I didn't set out for this. Victor, he listens, Nathan. He respects what I bring, what I want. With you, it's all the work, never us. I shook my head, grappling with her reasoning. That's not true. I've always had your back. I thought we were in it together. We were, she said, softer now. But things shift. People do. I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't want to wreck you like this. Sorry doesn't undo it, I replied, steeling myself. You picked your side. Now I've got to pick mine. She stepped toward me, hand half out, but I stepped back. What's your move? She asked, unease threading her voice. I inhaled, steadying. I'm keeping what's mine. The patent, the company, all I've built. You and Victor won't walk away with it. Her expression tightened, the softness gone. You can't block us. The board's already tilting our way. You're too late. I gave her a thin, cold smile. You're mistaken. I've already started moving pieces. You'll see. Her eyes narrowed, doubt creeping in. What VE you done? You'll find out, I said, turning away. We're done talking for now. Walking out, leaving her there, I felt a jagged mix of ache and clarity. The clash had been rough, unavoidable. Her justifications fell flat, her betrayal stark and exposed. Now, the next step was mine to take. She thought she held the advantage, but she didn't know what I could do. This was nowhere near finished, and I was only beginning. I had to be precise, like calibrating a delicate instrument, ensuring every step aligned perfectly with my goal. Elena always handled the social dynamics, reading people and steering conversations, while I focused on the technical details, the systems that kept everything running. Now, those details were my weapon, and I was ready to wield them. Before confronting her, I had uncovered a clause in our patent agreement, a safeguard I insisted on years ago that allowed me to transfer ownership under specific conditions. She signed it without hesitation, trusting me to manage the paperwork, never suspecting it could turn against her. That oversight was about to unravel everything she had planned with Victor. The morning after our confrontation, I met with my attorney, Mr. Jacobs, in his office downtown. The room carried the weight of old books and polished wood, a grounding contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. Jacobs adjusted his glasses and reviewed the documents spread across his desk. It's all set, Nathan, he said, his voice steady as he tapped the papers. The clause you activated holds up perfectly. Elena's signature is right here, and I'd wager she didn't even glance at the fine print. I leaned back in the chair, feeling a mix of relief and something sharper, more bitter. So, the patent belongs to my holding entity now? I asked, needing confirmation. Completely, Jacobs replied. The company has no claim to it anymore. You've pulled the foundation out from under them. I nodded, exhaling slowly, knowing this was just the beginning. The patent was secure, but the real reckoning awaited at the board meeting. Back home, I spread out the evidence I had collected across my dining table: audio recordings from the cabin, access logs showing Elena pulling files she shouldn't have, and emails between her and Victor that I had obtained through a discreet source. Each piece was a thread in the web they had woven, and I was about to tear it apart. Sorting through it all, I caught sight of an old photo: Elena and me at a company launch, smiling like the world was ours. For a moment, I hesitated, the ache of what we'd lost tugging at me, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about nostalgia, it was about protecting what I had built. I spent the night organizing my presentation, rehearsing every word until it felt unshakable. Tomorrow, I would face the board and bring everything into the open. Walking into the boardroom the next day, I could feel the tension hanging over the table like a storm waiting to break. The members shifted in their seats, exchanging quick, uncertain glances as I set my folder down with a deliberate thud. Elena sat at the far end, her posture stiff, her face a careful mask, though I could see the unease in her eyes. Victor wasn't there, he didn't have a seat on the board, but his presence lingered in the air. I took a breath and began. "Thank you all for being here on short notice," I said, keeping my tone even. "I need to update you on some critical changes to the company's assets and address certain behaviors that have come to light." I opened with the patent transfer, laying it out step by step. As of yesterday, the core patent for our robotics system has been moved to a holding entity under my sole control, I explained, sliding copies of the agreement across the table. This was done legally, based on a clause in the original contract, signed by all parties, including Elena. I pointed to her signature, clear as day on the page. The room erupted in murmurs, a few gasps cutting through the noise. Elena shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. You can't just strip the company of its patent." I held her gaze, unflinching. "I can, and I did. You signed the document, Elena. Maybe you should have paid closer attention." Mr. Thompson, the chairman, leaned forward, his brow creasing with concern. "Nathan, this is a drastic move. Why take this step now?" I steadied myself, ready for the next part. "Because I've uncovered evidence of a coordinated effort to undermine my role in this company and redirect its assets," I said, distributing the emails and logs. "These show that Elena and Victor Lang have been working together to push me out and seize control for themselves." The board members flipped through the pages, their faces hardening as they read. Elena's voice cracked as she spoke. "He's twisting this. It's all lies to ruin me over personal grudges." I pressed on, pulling out the recordings. "I have audio that backs this up," I said, pressing play. Elena's voice filled the room, clipped and urgent. "We need to keep this quiet." Nathan's sharp. "If we move too fast, he'll catch on." Then Victor's, smooth and confident. "Once we secure the patent, he's irrelevant." The silence that followed was heavy, the board members frozen as the words sank in. I stopped the playback and added, "There's more. I've also found evidence that Victor has been using confidential company information for illegal financial gains, possibly insider trading. I've passed this along to the authorities for investigation." I handed Thompson a stack of transaction records, watching his expression turn grave. Elena sank back into her chair, her hands shaking. "I didn't know about any trading," she said, her voice barely audible. "I swear I didn't." Thompson cleared his throat, his tone firm. "This evidence is overwhelming, Nathan. We can't overlook it. Elena, effective immediately, you're removed from the board and all company roles while we investigate further." She stared at him, then at me, her eyes glistening, but she didn't argue. The meeting wrapped up quickly after that, the board members filing out in a daze, leaving me alone with Elena as she approached me. "How could you do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "We built this together." I met her gaze, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "You chose to turn against me, Elena, in every way that mattered. Now you're facing the results." She turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the empty room. I stayed behind, staring at the scattered papers, the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. I had won, kept what was mine, but the company was reeling, and the life I'd known with Elena was gone. It was the right move, the only move, yet the quiet that followed felt emptier than I'd expected. I'm standing in the empty lobby of what used to be our company's headquarters, a place that once buzzed with activity and purpose but now sits hollow and abandoned. The desks have been cleared out, the computers disconnected, and the walls stripped down to nothing but faint marks where awards and posters once hung proudly. I've asked Elena to meet me here one last time, and the choice feels right somehow, like closing a book in the exact spot where it was first opened. This building was where we poured our energy, where we took rough ideas and shaped them into something real, where we convinced ourselves we were crafting a life together. As I wait for her, my mind drifts back to those early days when everything seemed possible, when Elena and I were just two college kids with big plans and bigger dreams. She had this way of lighting up a room, selling our vision to anyone who'd listen, while I stayed up late figuring out the details to make it all work. We balanced each other perfectly back then, or at least I thought we did, and for a while, it felt like nothing could stop us. Those memories flood in now, uninvited but persistent, as I pace the empty space and try to make sense of where it all went wrong. I can still picture us here late at night, running on coffee and adrenaline, laughing over dumb errors in the code or celebrating when we finally cracked a problem. We weren't just partners in business, we were everything to each other, friends, lovers, a team that could take on the world. But somewhere along the line, that connection frayed, and I didn't see it until it was too late. When I found out about her affair with Victor and their scheme to push me out of the company, it hit me like a freight train, breaking apart every assumption I'd held about us. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional too, a 1-2 punch that left me stunned and furious. I channeled that anger into action, fought to keep the patent I'd built from scratch, and made sure she was out of the company for good. It was the right move, the only move, but it didn't erase the ache that settled in afterward. Now, standing here alone, the anger isn't as sharp as it was, dulled by time and replaced with something heavier, sadness, maybe, or just exhaustion. I've had weeks to think about what happened, to replay every moment and see the cracks I missed before. Our marriage didn't collapse because of Victor, it was already crumbling, held together by habit and a shared address rather than anything solid. We stopped talking, really talking, long before he showed up, and I can't pretend I didn't play a part in that drift. The sound of the door creaking open pulls me out of my thoughts, and Elena steps inside, looking worn down in a way I've never seen her before. Her hair's tied back messily, strands escaping like she didn't bother to fix them, and her eyes are shadowed with fatigue. She's still Elena, still carrying that stubborn spark, but it's dimmer now, weighed down by everything that's happened. "Nathan," she says, her voice rough and low, "you wanted to see me?" I nod in motion to the empty room around us, the silence pressing in from all sides. I figured this was the place for it. She glances around, her expression softening for a second as she takes it in. "Hard to believe it's all gone." "It is," I say, keeping my tone even, "but things change." She breathes in deep, like she's bracing herself for what's coming, and then her words tumble out. "Nathan, I've said it before, but I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end up like this." I raise a hand to cut her off, not harsh but firm, because I've heard this already and it doesn't fix anything. "Elena, saying sorry doesn't undo what's done. You know that." She presses her lips together, nodding slowly, and I can see her searching for the right thing to say. "I get it. But I need you to understand I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought I was saving the company, saving us, in some messed up way." Her words spark something in me, and a laugh escapes before I can stop it, sharp and bitter, bouncing off the bare walls. "Saving us? By running off with Victor and trying to take my work? That's a strange way to spin it." She flinches, her gaze dropping to the floor, and I can tell that landed hard. "I know I screwed up," she says quietly. "I see it now. Back then, I felt stuck. You were buried in the details, and I thought we were slipping behind. Victor had ideas, a plan, and I went along with it." "He gave you more than a plan," I say, and the words taste sour as they leave my mouth. "You picked him over me, over everything we made together." Her eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't argue, just stands there letting the truth hang between us. "It was a mistake, Nathan. A huge one. But I still care about you. Isn't there some way we can fix this? Not the company, but us?" I look at her, taking in the plea in her voice, the way she's clinging to a thread of hope, and part of me wants to reach for it, to believe we could patch this up and go back. But that part's small, drowned out by the reality staring me in the face. Trust isn't something you can glue back together once it's smashed, and she broke it in a way that can't be fixed. Elena, I say, keeping my voice steady even though it's hard, I hear you're sorry, but it's too late. What we had is finished. I can't stay with someone I can't rely on, someone who turned on me like that. She shuts her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, and her voice comes out small. I get it. I don't blame you. We stand there, the silence stretching out, heavy with everything we've lost. I think we need to go our own ways, I say finally. I'll get the divorce papers started. We can keep it civil, if you're willing. She nods, brushing at her face with her sleeve. Yeah, that's fair. I won't make it harder than it needs to be. She hesitates, then asks, what's next for you? I shrug, feeling a weird mix of relief and uncertainty settle in. Not sure yet. Might take a break, travel, get some distance. The patent's safe, so I've got time to figure it out. She manages a faint smile, sad but real. Good. I'm glad you kept it. You earned that. What about you? I ask, curious despite myself. No idea, she says, honest and raw. I've got a mess to clean up, but I'll manage. I nod, respecting that she's not giving up entirely. Take care, Elena. I mean that. You too, Nathan, she says. And I'm sorry again. I hope you can let this go someday. Maybe, I say, though I'm not sure I believe it. Look after yourself. She turns and walks out, her steps loud in the empty space, and when the door shuts, it's like a line being drawn under all of this. I linger for a minute, letting the memories wash over me one last time, then head for the exit, ready to see what's waiting on the other side. I'm standing on the balcony of my apartment in Tokyo, watching the city stretch out below me like a living circuit board, all lights and movement, humming with an energy that feels entirely new to me. It's been 6 months since I left everything behind, since the divorce papers were signed, since the company I built with Elena fell apart, since I walked away from a life that no longer fit who I was becoming. The air here carries a sharpness that wakes me up every morning, and it aligns with the clarity I've found inside myself over these past months. I didn't move to Tokyo to escape, even if some might see it that way from the outside. I came here to start fresh, to create something entirely my own, the way I once did years ago with Elena, only this time I'm guided by my own rules and a sharper sense of what I need. The robotics think tank I joined welcomed me with open arms, especially after I brought the patent I'd worked so hard to protect. It's strange to think about how something tied to such a painful time could lead me to this point, where my ideas are not just accepted but celebrated. Every day, I'm surrounded by people who challenge me, who see the world as a puzzle to piece together, and it's exactly the kind of environment I've always wanted to be part of. The patent, which I nearly lost to Victor's schemes, is now the backbone of my work here, and we're exploring possibilities I hadn't even considered back home. I spend my days designing systems and testing theories, collaborating with engineers who push me to think bigger, and it's given me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The success I'm finding here isn't just luck, it's the result of standing my ground when everything was falling apart, and that choice has paid off in ways I couldn't have predicted. Looking back, I've had plenty of time to sort through what happened with Elena and Victor, to understand how it all unraveled and what it did to me. The sting of their betrayal hasn't completely faded, and I doubt it ever will entirely, but I don't let it pull me under anymore. I've come to see that their actions were more about them than me, Elena chasing something she thought she needed, Victor grabbing at power however he could. It wasn't a reflection of my value, even if it felt that way when I first found out. What I've taken from it is a harder-earned kind of wisdom. I trust my gut now, I notice when things don't add up, and I'm not afraid to draw a line when I need to. That experience forced me to look at myself, to figure out what I really wanted and who I could rely on, and I'm stronger for it, even if the process was messy and painful at times. Sometimes, I wonder how things might have turned out differently, whether Elena and I could have kept going if Victor hadn't stepped in or if we'd caught the problems between us sooner. We might have stayed partners, might have kept the company alive together, but the truth is we'd drifted apart long before that final blow. I don't carry anger toward her anymore, or toward Victor either, they're just people who made their choices, and I've made mine. Word reached me recently that Elena's trying to rebuild, maybe taking on consulting work, and I genuinely hope she finds her footing. Victor's tied up with legal issues, probably too busy to cause anyone else trouble, and I'm fine with letting him fade into the background. They used to take up so much space in my head, but now they're just part of a story that's already ended. Out here on this balcony, with the city sprawling in every direction, I feel a calm I hadn't known for years, a steadiness that comes from knowing I've changed. I used to let things happen to me, trusting that hard work and good intentions would carry me through, but that version of me is gone. Now, I'm more intentional, more aware of the people around me and what they bring to my life. I've learned to guard what matters, to push back when I need to, and to value myself enough to walk away when something's not right. It's not a lesson I wanted, but it's one that's made me better, and I can see now how that struggle opened the door to where I am today. The past isn't a weight anymore, it's a map I've learned to read. What's ahead is still unclear, and I'm comfortable with that uncertainty for the first time in a long while. There are projects at the think tank that have me excited, new systems to design, partnerships with brilliant people from across the globe, maybe even a chance to guide younger engineers who are just starting out. I'm not in a rush to pin it all down, though, and I'm enjoying the freedom of taking each day as it comes, building something solid without the pressure of what I've left behind. I've even started thinking about letting someone new into my life someday, though I'm not chasing it. If it happens, it'll be with someone who fits this version of me, and if it doesn't, I'm good on my own. I've learned I don't need anyone else to feel complete. The sun's dipping below the skyline now, painting the city in shades of orange and gold, and I take a long breath, letting the moment settle over me. This is my life now, and it's one I'm proud of, built from scratch in a way I never expected. I've come a long way from that hollow goodbye with Elena, from the chaos that threatened to pull me under, and I like the man I've become. The future's wide open, stretching out like the lights below, and I'm ready to see where it takes me.